Hi there. Thank you so much for listening to Grounded in Maine today. My name is Amy, and my guest today is Doug Katz. Doug is the co-founder, and he's a chronic inventor,
I,
entrepreneur.
I love that. Chronic inventor.
I'm sure that there's a maybe a more glamorous term that, but I can't think of it right now. But just like you're constantly thinking of ways to fix problems. But Doug, thank you so much for being here. I'm really excited to hear, all about. Doug has invented the Nulu knife, and he's gonna tell us all about it. So if you're on
I am going
YouTube,
to
you
tell
can
you all
see
about
that
it.
just now. If you're listening, you might want to head to YouTube. But I think that there's also going to be pictures, so you can see a picture at some point too.
And they could go to the website too, Nulu
And
Knives.
that,
So it could be like a dual sensory thing for them.
yeah, absolutely. So thank you so much for being here. I'm really excited to talk about this.
Awesome. I love talking about my stuff. So,
So Nulu knife. What does Nulu mean?
well, the Nulu came about as a logical extension of a knife called the Ulu. And the Ulu knife is an Inuit knife. It's a knife that was traditionally used by women because they did more varied tasks around the village where the men did more hunting and fieldcraft. So they would have had a knife more like this maybe, right? Like a really typical linear knife. The Ulu uses a little less steel, right? This is my knife, but an Ulu is basically just the crescent blade. This is part of what we are patenting.
Hmm.
Um, and it just had a real good natural alignment. You'll see in a lot of the adaptive catalogs and things like that, um, Ulus, because it's just sort of got that natural ergonomic adaptive capacity. What we did was we looked and said, what about that geometry works really well, and can it be extended? And how can it be optimized? Because I designed it around my own issues. I'm a disabled vet. Luckily, my issues aren't as bad as a lot of the people who saw combat, but you get beat up. And between carpal tunnel and arthritis and chronic tennis elbow and all that, and
Hmm.
liking to cook and wanting to and making knives, I designed it around my own needs. And that was sort of the inspiration, right? Is I had made an Ulu, like a pizza cutter, and then one day I was out there feeling sorry for myself in my workshop. I couldn't really swing a hammer, so I couldn't forge anything. And I keep a lot of scrap metal around. There was a circular saw blade that I'm like, oh, I can experiment with this. And that's where I said, well, wait, why does this work well? And that's where it came from. So the Nulu is the new Ulu.
Okay. And so, all right. So you said you're a military vet, a disabled military vet. So you have some just like I don't know, like you said, like arthritis, tennis
Yeah,
elbow.
I've got, my knees and ankles are bad, but that's not the primary issue right now. I had to have my shoulder rebuilt, and that solved a lot of the problems, but I still have a lot of issues with the other joints, elbow, wrist, hand, and it's just a lot of times if you talk to military people or anybody who's in like the trades, or it just
Right.
tears your
Grip
body.
is grip gets
But
really weak.
yeah, so for me, actually, I have more capabilities with like moving heavy, like because you're not articulating, right? When I exercise, I actually will keep a bar sort of open hand, which is not the safest. My son bawled me out for that, but I find that I don't grip it and cause
Yeah.
inflammation and pain in my joints, and there's some of that same thinking. So for me, it's fine motor skills, and it comes and goes, and that's why we as an organization, we look at disability differently. People, I think, tend to grade their ability based on what is accepted for their contemporaries. Whereas I look at it, and it kind of goes back to my military time. And the military has always been about a standard.
Hmm.
And when you're evaluated, it's your task, under what conditions and what standards.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, you
uh,
can either do it or
uh,
you can't do it,
that's
basically.
exactly right. And so I look at it as children, in some ways, are functionally disabled for many tasks, right? So for tasks that are appropriate, yes, for an adult task, they can't do it, but we don't call them disabled, but they can't do the task. So their ability, so we're trying to take more of a view that way where what's the task? Like we should be focusing on what can someone do? What can someone do if they're assisted? What can they just completely not do? That we should be looking to minimize.
Right.
So that's where with this, our biggest challenge is to say, is it an adaptive knife or will it apply to all of us at some point as we all degrade? And that's where we've really gotten into more universal design and thinking in terms of like, there's so much out there that's been universally designed that we don't even think about that. Yet there will be people who say, well, why do we need a new knife? But they're using, voice to text. They're all these things that were very, very much have its root in the adaptive space.
Ooh, touche. Well, and I mean, as you were talking about the adaptive knife versus what people are using like the standard knives, like maybe we should all be using these Nulu knives or
Well,
Unu
I
knives.
think it goes beyond. I mean, I love cutting, but I think it goes beyond that. I think it really gets down to ritual sometimes versus improvement innovation.
Hmm.
So I remember when I posted, I like one of my first TikToks. Someone said, "Oh, great! Someone wants to reinvent the wheel." To which my answer was, "The wheel has been reinvented many times to make it better." So I think that embracing universal design as a companion innovation mindset to the human condition means that universal design allows people who are on the younger spectrum, right? The younger age spectrum, are able to do more because you're designing things for people who have disabilities, more or less, right? So this
Right.
is universality, but you're also designing for the senior
Hmm.
senior population, which is way more important than people think about it. I've been a caretaker too, and I designed this when my dad was living with us, and he liked it. But being a caretaker is hard. So anything that you can do adaptively, not for yourself, but when you understand it and can help somebody, it's an interesting window into your own. You're sitting on courtside seats of aging.
Hmm.
And I read somewhere, I don't know the science behind it, so I'm not going to pretend to, where you sort of age, you sort of plateau and you age in these milestones. And not every, it depends on fitness and genetics,
Yeah.
but there are times when there's pretty serious decline. And to sit through watching that, I guess, years and understanding it and seeing that it's gradual and then not, and then it is again, everybody should be looking and saying every mainstreamed, universally designed product will make my life easier
Hmm. Yeah.
and less make me dependent, which has a financial component, it has a purpose component, it
Hmm.
has like there's so much about it that it's just I think how we should be doing things.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I was thinking. Like maybe what we've been using as like a standard knife is not really.
You know what? I know where you're going, and the interesting thing is, and I love using this to demonstrate because it's a very primitive knife, and it really speaks to why we don't get away from these. Is
Okay.
because there's like a connection. This and fire, right? That's what created civilization.
Hmm.
So the attachment to this, but at the time this was created, this would have been a more important
Exactly.
functionality. So
Right.
I have to kill my meal and then I cut my meal.
Right.
This is a secondary, oh, I'm going the wrong way. This is a secondary function
Yep.
that it does well enough that I would never think in terms of this being not a good tool. But because it's such a seminal thing of humanity,
Hmm.
it has this connection. And as you look at knives there's people have their favorites, right? Field guys who are on the field, like, love different kind of knives, right? And then you can even look at in some cultures, and I'll say blades, not even knives, just blades. The connection for samurai and the makers of the katanas that they used, there's a spiritual connection to that. It was something that was as much part of them as their body. And then, knights with the cross hilt, and it was so all these things sort of became part
Mm.
of identity, and that's hard to get rid of when you know when there's that connection. And I
Hmm.
think it's appreciating it, right? Like I would not go out in the field hiking or anything and bring a knife only like this, because I might bring that with me because it's light and whatever, but you need a field craft type knife to do field craft.
Yeah, for sure.
So I think that's been one of our big challenges, frankly, is getting people to get outside themselves enough to say, I'll give it a try.
Hmm.
And that's actually partly why we wanted to root it in the Ulu, is when people who've seen an Ulu will buy it on spec. They'll be like, "Oh, I get it." Other folks not as much.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I'm just thinking like myself cooking, cutting, I get blisters because the knife, you hold the knife a certain way and I get blisters on the inside of my finger and I cut my finger. Um, and but like and then, just the gripping. The gripping is
Yes.
is exhausting on your
Well,
hand.
and that's this what we found, and this was really, I designed around myself,
Hmm.
and I have issues, but they're not as severe as a lot of. So we unveiled this. I'm gonna move my camera a little bit here. We unveiled this at an abilities expo, and there were some people who had pretty profound cerebral palsy, as an example.
Mm,
There's one young man who looked like he had been in an explosion or some type of fire, and really had two digits, right? He had, but the interesting thing is because of the alignment, and you can see how this aligns differently. This
right.
aligns for cutting. My
Right.
camera was like zooming. I didn't know it did that. What it means is I only have to hold it to defy gravity. So I'll actually cut, and this makes my partner crazy, and I'm sorry about the glare for my thing, but I'll cut holding it like this. And what it does is it makes me not grip it.
Yep.
And
Because you
when
can
you
rock
get
it.
right, there's actually a white paper I wrote, not necessarily an academic one, but just based on my experiential stuff, is when you use a regular knife, you grip it really, really tightly. What that does is it breaks your kinetic chain too. So all of the force that you have in your body, and this goes, this is the bastard child of like all my hobbies, because it was like knife making, but then I also did martial arts. And the one thing about martial arts, whether they're practical or not in a fight, they're very much about efficiency.
Hmm.
The most force that you can put into a punch or a throw or a kick, and never is it something that is indirect.
Okay.
This, when you're cutting, is indirect.
Hmm.
So what happened, and most of the time, you want to be very, very loose in your upper body, and you want to bring the whole force. Even a boxer or someone playing baseball, all your strength is in your core. But
Right.
cutting, we tend to start thinking about knife technique.
Hmm.
We start thinking about how do you grip a knife a certain way, when arguably the knife should become an extension of your body. And the biggest problem we have with this is people say, how to use it right. And the best example I could give, and I'm going to date my age here, is like if you look at some exercise equipment like the Bowflex, I guess you could look at something like the Total Gym, the Chuck Norris Total Gym, which is really not. It's got like a couple of pulleys, and there are certain ways you can use it that they recommend. But in a lot of ways, they're like, if you don't use too much weight, use whatever feels right. Like let your body tell you. People don't. They want to know how to do things right, as opposed to saying, "Oh, this feels right for me." And it was mind blowing when we did the same abilities expo. There was a young gentleman who had it was some type of dwarfism condition, and his grip strength wasn't real strong, but he couldn't use it as well. Like I tend to use it very linear with my body. I like to have my elbow in, he couldn't do that. And he was all over the place using it. And I was like, oh, that worked for him. So we're really trying to cultivate within the means of being safe.
Mm-hmm.
Use it however works for you. There's some ways we can recommend in sort of the design and the normal biomechanics that you would see with somebody who doesn't have some type of major issue that changes the angles at which they can do things. We've gotten a lot more open-minded about letting people let their body tell them, oh, this works for me. Because then that is really independence, right? That the hard part is the thing I've seen actually in the space for adaptive products is they're not designed by the people who use them. Right? It just seems like a lot of them, and one of the reasons is when I look at that, and this gets back to universal design, a lot of this stuff is designed around utility
Mm-hmm.
and not aesthetics. So it's funny, we're working on our next generation of knife, and I was joking with my partners where I said, I want a knife that when someone takes it out, someone says, I wish I was disabled. And it's jokingly, but you know
Right.
what right? Where they look and they say, that is a gorgeous tool.
Right.
And I would love to use it, maybe not need it. So that's, I think, where we also go wrong to some degree in trying to solve these problems is because we think if we just solve the problem, it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for the disabled folks, they want to be cool too, right? Like they so it's been an interesting journey. It's not the way I thought it would go, but it's been far more rewarding and enlightening than I ever have thought. And even being disabled, almost in the hierarchy of disability, being ableist.
Mm-hmm.
If that even makes sense.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there are so many different levels of ability,
Yes.
and your disability or your ability is different than other people's. And so, I think it must be fascinating to show different stages, different abilities, like the Nulu knife and like how you use it. And they would be like, I mean, like you were saying,
Yeah.
the gentleman that couldn't grip close to his body, but still can use it. And I just think that, and you were talking about caregiving and senior folks, but like, especially people that grew up cooking, if they're on the older end and they just can't grip or whatever reason cooking has been out of their, because I just enjoy food so much. So I'm thinking when I get older, if the need was there, I wouldn't want to lose that ability.
Oh, well, and to the degree that they're finding now how how integrated we are with our diet
Yeah.
and how inflammation and everything, there's not a thing, right? So, and it's the most primal thing, right? It almost goes back to that knife. And I think that there is a connection to health and
Hmm.
inflammation and all of that kind of stuff. The ability to be able to feed yourself or come as close to that as possible.
Right.
It's just so it's it's Maslow, right? Like it gets to the hierarchy of needs that you have. So I agree with you. We hope that to some degree, long-term vision, that it's sort of an envelopment, to take a military term,
Hmm.
where the market that we have the most trouble with are like able-bodied 25 to 45-year-old people, right? Where they look and they're like, I'm great and blah blah, right? But they forget that they had to age into being able-bodied and that they will age out of it. So eventually, we would like to be the first knife, the first steel knife that younger people use. And that's not to say we're recommending, hey, give a 7-year-old a knife. But at some point, a parent will make a decision to say, we're done with the plastic knives, and I'm going to let my child, and they could be what, 11 or 12 or whatever, you still don't have a lot of strength. And the more than that you have to try and power through a cut, the less precise you are, the more issues can happen. So I'm hoping on one level, we can introduce children to cooking younger, or young people, I should say. And on the other side, we can keep the people who should be cooking longer. And eventually, I think then that changes the whole dynamic where, yes, some people are going to want to use their $1,000 Japanese sushi knives or whatever.
Sure.
And that's great, right? That's like when I'm a shooting enthusiast, and sometimes I'd like to go to the range and use that was Elvis, by the way, sorry about that, and use a cowboy action type gun, where it's a very different shooting experience, but it sort of connects you to the history and what it would have been like to shoot that back then. I think that there is sometimes using a regular or traditional knife is cool, or some things you just can't do with this footprint. So I think it's remaining connected, but I would like this to be the one that people grab because it just works, right? Where it's like, okay, I got to cook dinner, and it's going to be I have 15 minutes after work. Like we were talking about your schedule, full-time job and a podcast, right? For you, I'm sure part of it is how can I continue to eat well, enjoy cooking, enjoy eating, but strip out some of the time, effort, and everything that's associated with the prep. So being able to do that just gives you more free time. So I think if we can socialize that and get there, and frankly, one place I do think that Gen Z and those younger than I'm Gen X is more of a acceptance of disability and just understanding, right? Because I think they grew up with it in elementary school more where, for good, bad, or indifferent, when I was in elementary school, there were special education programs and stuff, but it wasn't as tied together. My kids did Best Buddies. Two of them did where they help instruct in the special education. I think it's a national program. And there's just more connection with it. And I think when there's more connection with it, you can empathize more and say, oh, okay, well, here. And, then it's not as alien. Because
Right.
it's binary. It's such an identity thing of like
Right.
able-bodied or disabled. And it's like, I never understood. Well, I don't understand it now. I guess I did understand it when it was me who was like, I'm invincible.
Yeah. Well, I mean, oh gosh, there are so many things on that. I mean, yes, like when we were growing up, because I'm also Gen X, um, it was like there are the folks that are in special ed, but there as we're aging, as we're learning more, there are the silent disabilities, dyslexia and, anxiety, stuff like that. Like those were not
Oh,
talked about.
well, I ADHD, right? And
Exactly.
what's funny, what's interesting on the ADHD to take a little detour here is so let's see, I graduated high school in '89. So I would have been in elementary school in like the early '80s or whatever, late '70s, early '80s. And they had gifted and talented programs.
Hmm.
But what was interesting is it was like all the people with undiagnosed ADD, right? And then just for
Yeah. I mean,
just
we
to
know
make
that
fun,
now, like ADHD or
it,
ADD was not really,
now
I
it's a
mean,
disability. But back then it was a superpower. And
yeah.
the funny thing for me is, so uh I was just curious. And so I went to the VA and I'm like, I think I'm ADHD. And they're like, oh yeah, they did some tests.
Oh yeah, you
But
are.
they could give me any, but what's interesting is this is where it was a superpower is in the field when you would be doing, I never went to actual war. I was forward deployed at one point, but I never experienced what other people did. But ADD in a rapidly changing, uncertain situation is great because you can have four conversations at one time.
Hmm.
Um, it drives my family crazy, but I was like, oh, that's why I excelled in field when we'd go to the field.
Right.
So they were like, oh yeah, you're ADHD, but I also have a heart issue. So they couldn't give me ADD drugs. And but the guy was like, listen, he goes, you went to West Point, you had a good military career, you got your MBA, you know,
Right.
you seem to be doing okay, but it's and this is where it's kind of like I think when you label stuff, right? So if you go, okay, we have to call it either a disability or a gift, right? It gets back to the task.
Yeah.
So the thing is, it's like for me to do certain things is almost impossible because my ADD is getting worse as I get older, but partly because I'm now inventing, which is like tailor made for it, or entrepreneurialism,
Right.
tailor made for it. Um, but I think when you look at it and go, okay, it's ADD, the only way it's been a disability for me is many times, and I didn't do it this time, but I will tell like podcasters or people doing an interview, or I'll say, listen, I'm ADD. And if I cut you off, it's not me being rude and just tell me. And people totally respect it.
Yeah.
And but it was part of that thing of going, why would I not bring that up, right? Because people think you're rude until they're like, oh, and then they're like, okay, I get it, and then
Yeah.
they can bring you back in. And so I think, but it's not a disability in another context, and that's what drives me crazy.
Yeah.
Is some of us, I think, when you look at things that people who are more profoundly disabled could do
Hmm.
with the degree of technology and things that they can just do now with I mean now they're even just tying thought and crazy stuff, but just empathy, like
Hmm.
jobs that require empathy and an understanding but also an ability to read people,
Right.
um that would be, I would anticipate, huge, right? Where it's just what they have gotten good at doing all the time, and how they've learned to cope.
Yeah.
And I just think that's the problem, right? We focus on disability and not ability. And
Yeah.
the thing I always want to share,
Yeah. Well, it's
like,
like, good or bad. Like, the labels are what makes it so difficult.
yes,
It calling something a disability when it's just, I mean, depending on how you look at it, it's
yes.
disability or superpower, like you were
Well,
saying.
and there's a big difference. And this is, again, where disability, it gets lumped together, right? It's like Asians. And where people are like, "Oh, you're Asian," or, and because I'm not Asian, but when people say, and it's like, well, Japan's different than the Philippines, it's different than Korea, and a lot of them have fought each other in wars. So Asia isn't like a kind of person, right? There, you can be Asian;
It's a
it's a big
place.
area.
It's a place. Lots of
Disability is
people live
kind of like
there.
that, right? Right. So with disability, there's also the difference between. I say there's kind of like three different categories, right? There's sort of youth disability that will probably follow through the rest of the life, where they've really learned to cope.
Hmm.
There's things like MS, Parkinson's that are sort of midlife that sort of take that same route. And then or just aging. And then there's instantaneous disability.
Hmm.
There's a couple really good social media guys out there and gals that are accident victims, or you know for some reason, they were in an accident, like the gentleman who looked like he was burned. And those people, it's interesting because then they have to adjust over a way shorter period of time.
Right.
And it's a very, very different, the people who are like lifetime disabled, I think in just talking to many of them, when you see the person who immediately, who had a sort of an instantaneous disability, and they're like, wow, this world really isn't made for me, right? And they're like, yeah, no shit. And it gets back to that universal design, right? Everybody is 1 second away and some bad luck away from needing a universally designed world. And I
Hmm.
think if we can get that into our heads, then it's like, oh, right? Then it's just the right thing to do. And it might even benefit you.
Right. Right. Yeah. So, I mean, an adaptive tool is not, it's not necessarily, it's just an adaptive tool. That's all it is.
Yes.
And so, it doesn't matter if you have a disability or not. Like, it can be, I mean, if your disability is aging, or if
Right.
it's, being young, or if it's, an accident or something like that. Like, if it works for you, use it.
Right. Right. Well, and I think the degree, if we could stop tying ability and disability to ego in some ways, because I think it is, then it changes the whole dynamic. Because I don't know. I think that just I think a lot of people have a problem with an admission of deterioration or whatever, right? I can still do this, right? So you're Gen X, you're probably Seinfeld fan, right? When they had there was a Mendelbaum. There were these old guys on this episode of Seinfeld, right? And they kept trying to lift this TV and they threw their back out because they wouldn't admit that they're just too old to lift this TV. And it's a good episode. But I think that the more people look and say, geez, you know what? I could make my life easier. And unfortunately, I think the degree that people don't accept it and make changes, that's sometimes where the degradation occurs. Like I knew that I was accepting adaptive products when I'm like, man, Skechers, those are good shoes, right? Like, but all of a sudden you're looking and saying, yeah, I don't like bending over all the time. Like it hurts. And can I do it? Yes, but am I less likely to walk if I have to do that? Okay, this is an adaptive product. It's not a need-based one, but it's a level up to keep me doing what I should be doing to maintain some semblance of youth and fitness and health and vigor.
Right. I mean, yes. I mean, I agree with that completely. I mean, I feel like we all are using adaptive tools in one way or another. I mean, whether it be fitness, exercise or, insoles in our shoes or
Yeah.
whatever, there are just so many ways. And it's just a matter of how we see them and just accepting that we're all different.
Well, and this is the catch, right? So we're a capitalist society. I'm totally a capitalist. And we struggled in the beginning. The reason we came up with this ability curve model is we kept running into, what do we do? People say, well, how big can the adaptive market would be? And because we look at it as a curve,
Mhm.
and we're looking at it more task-based, it grows the market. So if you were to just take people with upper extremity issues, I include in that younger people and all that, it's like 114 million, right? It's like almost a third of the population for which this knife would be beneficial. There's probably some overlap in seated cutters because what we found was when you're cutting, if you're cutting forward, you sort of lose your strength. But if you're cutting backwards, it's more of a rowing motion.
Hmm.
And that we got watching seated cutters, and we never even thought of that.
What are seated covers?
Like seated cutters, someone who's in a wheelchair or someone who needs to sit down to
Seated.
cut.
Oh my gosh, Amy. Okay.
I was probably mumbling. But
Seated.
because we
Okay.
have this heel
Hitting.
blade, they're able to cut toward them and engage their core. Um, and so that like blew it up to where we're like, well, wait a minute. It's
Right.
probably more like 125 million people who could benefit from this. Does that mean all of them will buy it? No, but if we can take this ability curve, and to be honest, we're sort of getting it out there. We're not keeping it as a trade secret. We're not keeping it as something that we're necessarily copywriting or trademarking, because one, there's some just common sense to it.
Mhm.
But if something we create could allow other people to look and say, well, man, we're thinking about this wrong. If we can grow our market by X amount of people, maybe you can't hit the bullseye
Mhm.
and hit a whole 125 million. But if you could say, wow, I could grow my market by 25 million people if I think about this differently and do some design changing, or even better, I would love for more capital to flow into disabled entrepreneurs. If ever, you and I were talking about homesteading before this, and my military time. A lot of innovation is just solving problems on the fly.
Right.
And I've never met, except for my soldiers when I was in the Army, a more innovative group of people than the disabled group, right? They will make stuff out of pool noodles, PVC, whatever they can find to meet a need. And I know some of this could be commercialized.
Yep.
And it's funny, right? So let's say it's something to apply a lotion and you can't reach your back. Well, I don't consider myself disabled, but this is as far as the arm goes. So if you're looking and saying, oh, there are people who need this because there might be essential things that they need to apply that way, well, great. We can help them. But okay, what's the broader market appeal? And I think you could almost, from a commercial perspective, the same way that there's sort of this DARPA world where they'll design stuff for the military and then bring it to the civilian world. I think there is sort of this needs-based world where you can build a product, get it up and running with the needs-based community that will write a check or will be able to be reimbursed, which is the one thing, Elvis, which is the one thing now we're picking up is there's a unique benefit in the disabled community because if you make the right product that's essential, they get reimbursed for it. So you can build a good business in that area and then commercialize it into the broader market. And if that can be done, then all of a sudden you're going to see a lot more universal design because you're putting capitalism, right, in the right spot to really benefit everybody. Because if seniors can take better care of themselves, so senior care goes down, like all this stuff is all interrelated. So, who knows how much time I have left on this earth, but I would love to see in the next couple of decades thinking in that way. Because again, I will always tell people 1 second away from needing this. And it's not cumulative, but every second that goes by, it's not like, oh, okay, I'm past that, right? Like anything could happen to you. And I think some of the world we're living in now should really drive home how fragile any system, anything is, and that your best plans are going to get thrown out the window.
Yeah. Right. And I think, I keep thinking about, I mean, selfishly myself, that I mean, you're talking about, life is fragile and we don't always know what the next day is going to bring, that type of thing. Things could change anytime. But I'm just thinking, and I'm going to go back to the knife thing, like because we're talking about a knife. I have been wondering if like gripping a knife that tight and like, working with it with a straight knife, if that could if using a Nulu and just doing like the rocking motion or whatever, like would ease that grip
Yeah,
strength
oh, totally.
issue.
So a chef does not hold a knife this way. This
Right.
this is not a chef's knife. A chef will hold a knife this way,
Exactly.
and what they're doing is they're trying to align the knife with their body to recreate what we've got with the Nulu.
Hmm.
You still have to grip it. Now you're not going to death grip it, but you still have to grip it. They use the handle for balance actually, which is sort of funny in and of itself. But yes, you would anytime you grip really firmly, that all of a sudden is where your energy goes. And that's why I love holding it this loosely, and almost consciously, because I love where my fingers are. When I used to run, I can't run anymore, but when I used to run, even when I did fitness tests in the Army, I would grip my hands, right? And my upper body would get tight and I couldn't breathe as well. And then I don't remember who it was. One of my classmates was like, just hold your fingers like this, super lightly. And all of a sudden I was running better because I was unlocking everything in there. So I do this kind of the same way. And it drives, again, my partner crazy when we're trying to video this because he's like, well, it doesn't, and I get it, but doing this, you won't grip it that way. But it's alarming how much power that you actually have when you let go of sort of holding on
Yeah.
with that death grip.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's a little bit of physics, it's a little bit of geometry, but I would challenge people now. And the interesting thing about where we're at is we're sort of at this interesting time, I think, where the ability to research and come up with ideas and things like this, right? So when you're saying, well, wow, what I have this issue when I'm using a knife, and use any of the different language models out there, how can I solve that problem?
Mhm.
You're going to have a much better chance of doing it now than ever, and you may come across something where it's like, oh, wow, I've solved a problem that no one else has.
Yeah.
Can I commercialize it? So
Yeah. Right. And I think that it's So, I mean, I use the straight knives because that's what is readily
Oh,
available,
yeah,
right?
that's
And everyone else uses that. But like, what if that's not the best thing? And if we don't know about other options,
yes.
so you just need to get the message out and that's why we're
Yeah,
here.
well, the thing we're doing now, I'm sorry about that. The thing we're doing now is there are state adaptive programs in every state. I think it was the Bush administration might have done it, but they established a law where every state needs to have a adaptive technology lending library and or demo way to demo products. And it varies. Every state's different. But we're trying to get into all the states right now so people can try our product. But there are ways to get out there and try different products to see what works before you use them. So
Hmm.
that's a great resource for anybody listening who might be like, oh, you know what? I don't want to drop this much on a product. I mean, there
Yeah,
might be a wait list, but it's a really cool thing that we just happened upon.
I had no idea. That's really cool.
I believe it's AT3. And on our website, we now have a map of all of the programs that we have provided a knife to. But this is where, again, going back to trying to get reimbursement, we are also actively looking for people who are intending on buying it anyhow and are in the system where they can put in for reimbursement, because that's a crazy system, right? You talk about how hard it is to sometimes get into this stuff. Well, you would think it would be very easy to go, okay, I have a product that applies to this population. How can I give them the tools, if I've done my research and I've done everything I have, to
Mhm.
be able to validate why that should be a reimbursed product because it makes their life better and all that kind of thing? Super hard to do, actually. It's like really hard to
Oh,
find the right contacts and how to do it. So, we're kind of feeling our way on it. But, again, we hope that as we come up with a playbook, we can help other people who have interesting products who maybe are just not getting the momentum in the mass market and are like, oh, well, these guys did it. Maybe there's an application here where they could pivot. So, would love to help anybody out.
wow. Oh my gosh, you're blowing my mind here. That's really fascinating. I mean, I there's an adaptive lending library in every state.
Yes, and it's some states obviously like New York has like 7 different offices, and I think Montana's got like 2. Um, but they're a really, really good resource to just see what's out there. The,
Yeah.
the thing that we really realized about the disabled space is it's super fractured too. It's like really hard to find good information. There's a lot of great organizations doing great things. It's just hard to find them. And it's like anything else. It's, the when you buy a new car, you never notice the same car out there, but when you buy it, all of a sudden you're like, wow, a lot of people are driving the same car I drive. When you are all of a sudden in the disabled space, you look and you're like, wow, there are all these great resources that you ignored before, in a lot of different ways. So
Yeah. Or just looked completely past because it
yeah,
didn't affect you or something,
right. Right, but this is where, and I'll get on a soapbox for stuff like this. It's an important program that people don't value until they're disabled, right?
Yes.
Get the governor of Texas, right? He's in a wheelchair now. I'm sure he is digging universal design. Maybe before he was in a wheelchair, he didn't. Texas isn't a state, I don't think that is big on government programs and things like that. I may be wrong, so I'm sorry if any Texans out there if I'm making assumptions, but I think the importance of these programs being there is if you're one of those, oh, I'm disabled today because I got in a car accident, you're going to sure be happy that there's a lending library of a lot of times pretty expensive equipment that you can try out before there's an issue, or I'm sorry, before you're writing a check.
Yeah.
Good for caretakers to have the ability to say, hey, mom, dad, try this out. It'd be great for you. So it is a good resource. And we're trying to share some of that as we're doing our social posting because, all it does is help the community. I think there's a lot of co-opetition, it feels like, right? Where we're working on an adaptive cutting board right now. And there's a guy who who was in that space who we're talking to, and everyone's very open just about like, hey, here's what I'm doing, here's what you're doing, and just trying to figure it out. Because I think there's that impact innovation as opposed to it only being about finding that unicorn that's going to make you whatever amount of money. You can't take it with you. I think if you make a good product, you're not going to starve. But if you can change people's lives, it's awesome, right? When I was a changed man after the Abilities Expo, I was very already sold on the adaptive space for myself. But to see the joy of people being able to do something that they heretofore couldn't do
Mm-hmm.
it's really like all of a sudden it's like, wow, this thing that I made in my garage, um, and had some crazy people join me on the vision could have this impact. And, you sort of need that to not give up, right? We were talking about entrepreneurialism before.
Yeah.
You got to have something in the fuel tank to keep you going.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I love first of all, like I love that there's so much collaboration in the space. Like this is, you were saying this is what we're working on and, what do you think of that? Or I think that's awesome. I mean, I think we need more collaboration, period, but I love that there are so many people in the adaptive space that are like, what do you think of this? Like, would this work?
And I think it's also, it's been tough, right? As we're doing a bunch of bootstrapping, right? But we try to raise money and people just don't see. I was actually hoping that maybe you come across an investor or a family office who had an experience in their family with Parkinson's or MS, and they look and say, "Oh, I totally get this. I
Mhm.
get it's about impact." There isn't a lot about that, but I think that, and I hope that as this generation now, my kids are college age and they're looking at what they aspire to. I hope it can be impact and income, right? You don't have to do one or the other. And I think sometimes with stuff like, oh, you're helping the disabled community. Wow, that's so good. It's like, I'm not doing it for charity. And I just hope that there can be more of this realization
Right.
and bringing it really more into the zeitgeist.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and just a little side thing, like people think the same way of podcasting, really. Like, if you're not making money, it's just a hobby. But like there's an important message that's being shared and
Yeah, and I do love the podcast thing because it is conversations, right? It is, and I've been on some unique ones. I used to have my own, but it is nice to get out there and be able to share with more and more people. And I think especially like two of our affiliates are, no, I'm sorry, no, more than two, four of our affiliates are disabled. And I don't know that you would have, and they're all trying to make it work, right? I don't know how big their followings are, but I don't think in the previous mediascape that there was the chance for somebody with cerebral palsy. I think we have two people who are quads, two pair who are um, cerebral palsy, and one vision impaired. And it's just nice that they can do that and build a following and have purpose.
hmm
Because that's the other part about all of this is, it is great to be able to come up with adaptive products that make people's life easier. But if their life doesn't have anything connected to why they're waking up every day, then again, all you're doing is existing.
yeah. Oh my gosh, yes. Yes. And yeah, I have so many thoughts on that. I'm not even going to get into it. But can you tell us, Doug, can you just tell us more about the knife? Like you said it's made of steel? Is that
It is. It's an alloy. We make it in China, so it's a Chinese alloy, but it's similar to a 400 series stainless. Keeps a good edge. It's a ergonomic handle. And then the way it's designed is really two grips. There's what we call the foregrip, where you're sort of able to orient it where it aligns with your body and what you're capable of. With this heel blade that allows you to chop this way. Now you don't even have to rock her. You can also just move in sort of a piston motion to slice, and that's what you can do with that foredge. The cool thing is you can
oh,
also reverse grip and wait, let me get back in frame here. I'm going the wrong way. you can do more of a cleaver cut, and this is for that precision cutting.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, it is, and all of them align sort of differently. The one limitation is big things, watermelon, bread. There's some things it's just not optimized for, but generally it does a job for most everything. Again, not personal eating. We're kind of working on some solutions for that too, where someone's going to a restaurant or something.
Hmm. Oh, well, yeah, for sure. That's a big point. But you're just how long have you been doing this?
Well, the project's been about 3 years, but we just hit the market in June. This
Yeah.
was the first product. I was a service guy mostly before when I was in lending, and there's just a lot to it. So it took us longer to get to market. I'm working on some other things that are getting to market quicker because you're just like, oh, okay, I remember that mistake, so I'm not going to do that one again. Um, so I think every time that we have an iteration, it'll just be faster.
Yeah. So I mean, so you're going on, I mean, we're recording this in December, so it's been like 6 months on the market.
Yes, it's been 6 months on the market. And again, not catching, you always like to say, I'm going to great product and everybody's going to be wanting it, not quite that way. But we are getting good feedback. I think we're really trying to figure out where the pricing should be. We
Mhm.
have to premium price it just because it's complex to make, but we've got to figure out that point where we should not our adaptive cutting board in a couple of months. I should say a couple of weeks because I think they're on the water right now. We've got cutting boards and a dock where it could sit on a countertop and safely sit on a countertop. We
Yeah.
also have our own brand of cutting board wax that's coming out. I lost the battle on what to name it. I wanted to name it Nulu, Nulu's board goo. Now this is the big dad joke. So this is called the Nulu, right? Nulu, and I actually have a tattoo of it.
I like that.
But so Nulu is my spirit animal, right? It's a new GNU named Lu, Nulu. And it was just something I came up with at one point that I thought was kind of humorous. Why I got the tattoo. So I'm all in on this project. Put it that way. But I do when we bring it to the children's market. I have actually created this whole sort of universe around it because I think kids learn visually.
Hmm.
When I was in the military, um, the way they taught soldiers how to maintain vehicles. I mean, you could have given them a manual, but there's a magazine that came out every month that had like, oh, here's what you have to fix this month. All the recalls or whatever. And it was like a comic book. And it was really funny because I was like, oh, because you pick it up and you'd read it, right? You got nothing else to read, and you're like, oh, okay, here's this character. I like that character. So I'm thinking that might be the way we go with the kids, right? Is to make it a more dynamic environment and maybe be able to bring in sort of that adaptive universality that we're talking about now, where more of that sort of radical acceptance of everybody having their own levels of ability.
Mm. Oh my gosh, that's so inspiring. I love that. I just love that whole conversation about abilities versus disabilities and
Right.
just like it seems so important, especially now. Like I just feel like, there's everything is so polarized and it shouldn't be. It shouldn't
Oh,
be because even if I mentioned like the silent or invisible disabilities like anxiety or anorexia, something like that. Like there are things that people don't know about, and maybe someone is super skinny and they look beautiful and everything, but they also are not eating or whatever. Like we don't
yes,
know, and
right.
so we just need to accept that and find what works for us and just use it and be cool.
I totally agree with you. I don't look at it as anything but just being decent. Um, as you get to know more people in the disabled community, you really do look at like disabled parking spots differently, right? Like I'm technically disabled. Would I ever park in a disabled spot? No, it's just not appropriate for where I am on that hierarchy. I think the degree that really, again, all the the bar of what would give some of the more disabled community purpose and a good, it's not a lot to ask. And I just am amazed when people are ableist. It never makes any sense to me. Of course, again, everyone's ableist until a family member or they have an issue. And that's what drives me the most crazy is that lack of awareness that someone will be there. So just get on board with it.
Hmm. Oof, wow. And it's so true. I mean, until it affects you, you don't see it or it's less important. But
Yes.
it's just that's why these conversations I feel like are so important. Just to have these conversations. I the word normalize is so overused lately, but it's
Yes.
also maybe it's because it's so necessary. We need to
Yes.
be
I
talking
do think
about things and not make people feel othered in
yes.
general.
Yes. Totally. And and again, it's not that hard to do. And what's really interesting is people also go to the other end of the spectrum and are overly, whatever. And what's interesting is if we had more, and this is a good way to bring it home, I guess, more universal products, then you wouldn't really have to be going out of your way to do too much, right?
Mhm.
Like literally, you could get most of the disabled community to a level where they don't need help. So it isn't an inconvenience to be around them if that's what you thought it would be, or, that you're going to be in this hellscape of universal design, right? It makes everybody's life better.
Mm. Yep. Yeah,
There you go.
absolutely. I mean, I think that's
Almost like the
awesome.
mic drop moment, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm not gonna do the knife drop moment. That would be
Don't drop the knife. But I love the idea that you guys are doing you said a dock for it because I was just thinking,
yeah.
like where do you put that?
Well, you know what? It comes with a sheath. We just redesigned that to be better used for the disabled community, and actually, we're going to replace for free anybody who wants one. The other sheath, this was the sheath. It was just a little harder to open, and now you can snap it right out, which is really really cool. It's my design partner is like a wizard. He's pretty amazing.
That is very cool. All right. So folks listening, I definitely check out the website. Doug, can you tell us where to go?
www. It's old when I say that, right? You don't have to say it anymore. .nuluknives.com. We're also on Amazon and we have a TikTok shop. I can't even believe I'm saying that.
You're on the TikTok shop. How about
Yeah, the
that?
TikTok shop. Yeah, I got to do more work on it, but it is up and running. Um, and so they could go to our website. We are running a sale right now for the holidays. You won't get it by Christmas, obviously. And then again, we're on Amazon, on Prime, and all that, so they can find it there. If they want to know more about me, again, I have a pretty big digital footprint. I'm on LinkedIn and everywhere else. So, and I've actually just started some of the stuff that we're talking about today. I'm doing more public speaking, um, and I am launching a business to do that. So if people like what they heard and there's an organization where they feel it would be of value, I would be happy to come in. Hopefully get paid to do it, but there are situations where I would love to come in and talk on this because it's been quite a journey. And it's something where I think it's a gospel that needs to be spread.
Yeah, I'm with you. Okay, and so that's Nulu, Nulu, and then knives plural
Yes.
.com.
And we're on all the social. We're on Instagram, we're on LinkedIn, we're on Facebook, we're on TikTok, and we're on YouTube. So if there are some things like Nulu, there's like a neighborhood in New Orleans that's Nulu. But if you put in Nulu knives, you'll definitely find us.
Okay, that's very cool. Yeah, I think I saw that today, the Nulu, New Orleans. And so you guys check out the website, check them out on the socials where they are. Just look at it, see if it looks interesting to you, if that looks like it's something that would be helpful, if you know anybody that might be interested. And also if you maybe ask your adaptive lending library if they would
Yes.
carry.
And again, we're going to have all the states up probably this week. If your state doesn't carry it, um, tell them to carry it because there's a couple states that just haven't been responsive. So
Mm, okay. All right. And So last question, Doug, what does the word sustainability mean to you?
It means leaving things better than how you found them. Well, actually, the dock and the cutting boards we're making out of bamboo and acacia because they're sustainable woods, and we were pretty adamant on that. So it's you know, there's things are finite. If you look at where precious metals and industrial metals right now, it should be clear to us that things are finite, and we gotta have a way to keep going. Otherwise, we don't keep going.
Yeah, good point. And so last question that I was just thinking of when you were talking about the sheath or the docking station, but like is the knife something that can be sharpened?
Yes, we do
Okay.
sell. We're running a bundle right now on Amazon with the sharpener. It's a simple pull-through sharpener. They can see it on Amazon and on our site. And on my own YouTube, I do have some instructional videos, but it's pretty self-explanatory. A top sharpener is the best way to go, where you just kind of pull it through.
Okay. Super. Well, Doug Katz, thank you so much for this time.
Thank
This
you. This has
conversation
been a
has been
delightful
just like,
conversation.
yeah, I mean, and it kind of went in a different, we kind of went off a little bit, but I think it's really a really important message to share.
I agree. Hopefully, more people want to pay me for that message. My speaking business, right?
Awesome. So you guys check it out, nuluknives.com, and check out Douglas Katz wherever, Douglas M. Katz, right? Wherever.
DouglasMCats.com is my speaking page, but they can find me all over the place.
Awesome. Okay. Thanks again.
Thank you.